Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Paul Begala back with us. We'll chat with Paul in just a second, but first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So, Paul Begala is a CNN political commentator, consultant, and New York Times best-selling author. His most recent book was the election year hit, You're Fired, The Perfect Guide to Beating Donald Trump. He's also been a columnist for Newsweek and The Daily Beast, and was one of the founding contributing editors of his late friend JFK Jr.'s magazine, George. But perhaps most notably, he helped engineer Bill Clinton's winning presidential campaign in 1992 with his partner James Carville. He later served as counselor to the president, serving as one of President Clinton's closest aides and coordinating policy, politics, and communications. In the 2012 campaign, Paul was a senior advisor for the pro-Obama Super PAC, making him one of the few people to play a critical role in electing two different presidents. Paul, welcome back into the back room.
Andy, thanks. Great to be back here. It's nice and warm. The back room.
It is nice and toasty in here. So before we get into the current political craziness, I want to just go back in time a little bit. It's been a month now since the election. I think the night of and the day after, me and my fellow libtards were panicking. It looked like a big landslide mandate kind of thing. What the hell is happening? Whatever. A month later, it starts to appear like it's a lot different than that. And so in terms of the loss, what were your biggest takeaways? And where do you think the party and the candidate went wrong?
Well, first, thanks for having me back. Thanks for doing this podcast. It helps keep me going. Two things can be true at once. There's a movement around the world to throw out incumbent parties as never before. I mean, it is from Britain to Botswana, from Italy to India, from Germany to Japan. Everywhere you look, incumbent parties losing, left, right, and center. Populists like Narendra Modi have lost their majority in India. Institutionalists like the LDP in Kishida in Japan have lost their majority. So it's not just left, right. It is anti-establishment, and it is powerful. And I think it's mostly driven by inflation and the hangover of COVID. Also social media, which we can get into. So you have 70% of Americans thinking we're moving in the wrong direction. 70% think the economy is bad. And Trump gets 49. Now, he won. God bless him. I wish him well. Seriously, he's my president. If he wins, we win. Given his previous experience, I think it's going to be a catastrophe. But look, I hope I'm wrong. But he got 49 when 70% thought we were moving in the wrong direction, right? A more plausible Republican is going to get 59, 69. Mm-hmm. So my Republican friends, it's so interesting. They have learned nothing. They should look at this and say, holy smokes. We had, as Bill Clinton would say, we had a bird's nest on the ground. All we had to do was bend over and pick it up. And they could barely do it. They're not saying that. They're pretending that the guy who was running around talking about Arnold Palmer's junk is some kind of political genius. Okay, he's not. But he did win. At the same time, I think Democrats do need to learn from their mistakes. They might have lost anyway. But oh my God, when we lose voters under $50,000 a year, that is an existential threat. That is an extinction level threat. My party, your party, we exist to help poor people and working people make it in the world. Mm-hmm. But Democrats invented the weekend. Like, you're welcome, America. We invented the minimum wage. We invented the middle class. And we have lost them. So to me, that is a crisis. I don't fault the 107 days of Kamala's campaign. And there's things we can pick apart. But this is much more fundamental. When my party is losing the middle class and the poor, it's a catastrophe. And so Democrats do need to change, and they need to learn a lot from this. And I'm very happy to see the Republicans learn nothing. In fact, they're going to keep doubling down on their strategy. But my party, our party, needs to come back to the reason we exist, which is economic opportunity for people who work for a living.
Why do you think we've lost, and this has been going on for decades now, it's not a new phenomenon, but why do you think we continue to see that erosion in what was a major part of the coalition, which is the working class, the middle class, and even more so, how do you explain such anger about the economy when the reality is, by every metric we've ever used to measure the economy, this is one of the greatest economies America has ever experienced?
Well, let me start with the former. We have, in my lifetime, I'm 63. I'm an old man. And as a kid in my
I got you beat
Texas,
by 2 years, by the way.
Oh my gosh. Well, you look a lot better, man. You take better care.
Just got my Medicare card.
Thank God. And thank LBJ and the Democrats.
Yep.
When I was a kid working in Court's True Value Hardware store, Stafford, Texas, if you came in that store and you had your name stitched over your pocket, you're a Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
If you had your initials on your, embroidered on your French cuffs, you're a Republican. And think of how that has switched now. My party, our party, has gone from being the party of the factory floor to the party of the faculty lounge. And it's not even so much rich, poor. It's not that we're the party of the rich, although apparently we are. It's that we're the party of the educated elite. And I'm not against that. God, I have a law degree. I've taught at 4 universities. But we have lost that blue-collar sensibility. I mean, you mentioned my CNN colleague, Scott Jennings, and I hate to speak for him, but I know this for a fact. His father in Dawson Springs, Kentucky, a tiny little town, was the biggest Clinton supporter you ever met. Drove a garbage truck. Today, he's the biggest Trump guy. Jennings says his father was the first person to tell him Trump was going to win. So those blue-collar guys and gals, we have alienated them. Let's just be honest. And it's not, I don't think it's our economic policies. God knows Joe Biden has had the most progressive, pro-union, pro-worker economic policy than anybody going back to LBJ. He's been great. So how do we lose them? I think it's the social, cultural stuff, especially not even just the positions where we're speeding progress, which I like. It's the censorious, sanctimonious lecturing tone that we have for people who haven't quite caught up. So here's my slogan. I want to defund the pronoun police. Cut grandma a little slack. Okay, if she dead names your cousin Thomas, who's now Teresa. Okay, just cut her a little slack. Just don't jump ugly with everybody. Mm-hmm. It turns out when you go to people and you say you're a racist, sexist, homophobe, transphobe, Islamophobe, anti-Semite, they tend to not want to vote for you. So maybe just dial back the sanctimony a little bit, it would help.
Well, you were one of the masterminds behind Bill Clinton's 92 victory. He ran as a centrist, although Harris kind of ran, for the most part, pretty centrist as well. But he had such a mastery at being able to talk with and appeal to the average Janes and Joes out there across the country. But what you just said, it seems like the Democrats at the party overall did tick too far to the left with these culture war issues. And so they need to be more centrist, don't they? They need to your point, strip out all this stuff that maybe you do once you get elected. But if you're trying to appeal to the masses, you got to talk to them the way Clinton was able to talk with him, no?
Yeah, I traveled with him the last several days of this election, and it was like old times. It was just great. I mean, I still think he's the most gifted politician and just been a wonderful mentor to me. And we went, we went to a black church in Charlotte. We went to a Union Hall in Savannah. We went to a rally in Orlando with the Puerto Rican community. We went everywhere. Everywhere he went, he talked about one thing, the economy. Okay, it's not that I hate to speak for him, but it's not that he didn't think Trump was a threat to democracy, okay? But my own view, not speaking for President Clinton, is that if you were closing out this election, you thought Trump was a fascist, we have a name for you, Harris voter. Like, we already got you.
Right.
We got to make our case on middle-class economics, and there's a hell of a case to make. But it's not just that we've done a good job, but you need the prospective case. Here's what I'm going to do. And Kamala had some great policies. She did. On home ownership, on small business, on this sandwich generation, those of us who have a mother or grandmother in a nursing home and a child in preschool. So she had plenty of good ideas. But what I think is happening is that voters believe that these elitist social and cultural issues are what's driving us. And we need to flip that. The engine of our train is work and what Sherrod Brown calls the dignity of work. And I went out and saw him in Cleveland with President Clinton, campaigned for him, and it breaks my heart that he lost. Nobody's been a greater champion of like my flavor of Democrats. He's got a perfect record on gay rights, civil rights, abortion rights. What drives him is the dignity of work. And I think we need to get back to that. It's not that they don't want equality for their transgendered niece. It's that they think that's the only thing that we care about. So I pitch this. Let me try this on you. I pitch this to everybody and nobody would use it. Sorry, but it's true. I wanted to go at Trump personally on the economy and inflation because he gets a lot of credit for this myth that he's a businessman. Mm-hmm. Why not flip the coin over? Because the other side of businessman is avaricious ripoff artist. Mm-hmm. So how about this? This is all true, Andy. I looked it up. You know what he charges for a hamburger at Trump Towers? $18. $18. Now I know it's Manhattan, but you can walk 3 blocks away to Shake Shack and get a better burger for $8. Mm-hmm. He charges $300 for those ugly ass sneakers. I mean, Michael Jordan charges $200. He's Michael Jordan. He charges $60 for the Holy Bible, the Word of God. You can come to my church. We'll give it to you for free. Mm-hmm. So what does he do with that money? You know what he does with the money he makes from those Bibles? He takes it out in the backyard. He throws it up in the air. He says, Lord, take what you need and send the rest back down to me. So he is a ripoff artist who has jacked up prices himself. It costs $1 million to join Mar-a-Lago. $1 million. Do you think any of those wonderful blue-collar men and women who all they do is keep the lights on and feed the world and teach our kids and fight our wars, do any of them have $1 million to go hang out at Mar-a-Lago? That kind of populist indictment personally to him. He is personally fueling inflation. And I don't know why, but Democrats didn't seem to want to make that case. They wanted to say instead, well, we have the lowest inflation rate of any OECD nation, which, okay, eggs are still $3 a carton. They were $4.50. Now they're only $3, but they were $1.50 when Joe came in. Mm-hmm. That's not Joe's fault. But if you're trying to make breakfast tacos for your kids, it's going to piss you off. So I think we should have really engaged harder on the economy. I think we should have taken the fight on inflation right to Mr. Trump. And I think that kind of indictment would have been more effective. Now, would it have worked? I don't know. Because as I say, everybody is losing everywhere.
Well, you know, there's this incredibly famous statement. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's the economy, stupid.
I wish Carville had trademarked that and gotten a nickel for everything. Yeah.
Well, you know,
it still is.
Bill Clinton recently said, quote, politics is the only business in which you can prove your authenticity by not knowing anything. And he said, and he added that Democrats need to learn how to talk with voters in a way that they can relate to. Why? I know we're talking about this, but why has it become so hard for Democrats to speak to the people who have been the core of its constituency almost since the beginning of this country?
It's a great point. And not only to speak to them, but to relate to them.
Right.
It's like all of a sudden we're like Margaret Mead in Samoa and looking at working people like they're these exotic natives. And so at best we patronize. And at worst, we demonize. And, you know, President Clinton, he never calls it a speech. He calls it a talk. Mm-hmm. And he tries to be he's very conversational. And he is honestly the smartest person I've ever known. But he will always prefer a nickel word to a $10 word. Mm-hmm. He's a brilliant man. He's very sophisticated. But as we say in Texas, he believes in putting the jam on the lower shelf where the little folk can reach it. And so when we fall into this lexicon, particularly that's so judgmental, I'm sorry to be so mean about it, but like I literally, one of my kids was in college and his professor told him he was a fascist because he eats meat. Like, God almighty. Okay, maybe you think it's bad for you. I love meat, but God almighty. Do you think that made my son want to support that professor if he or she ran for office?
Or be a vegan?
I don't even know if it was a man or woman. Yeah. So when you tell people you hate them, they don't like it.
Right.
But if you talk to them and show that you can relate, and Kamala comes from the middle class. Trump was driven to school in a limousine as a child and potty trained on a gold toilet. Mm-hmm. The fact that we allowed him to become the avatar of the working class, it makes me insane.
But he's just like us, Paul. That's his evil genius. I mean, everything you said before, and the comment about relating, which is so crucial to this conversation, He, as the guy who was potty trained on a gold toilet and lives in a mansion in the sky and travels on private jets and limousines, he related to the so-called little
Yes.
guy. And that's his evil genius, that he was able to just say, don't look at my life and how I live and how I literally surround myself with nobody who looks and sounds like you. Just listen to what I say. And he was great at saying it. You got to give him his props for that, you know?
Absolutely. And it makes my head explode. But I have family and friends that support Trump. And like the first thing they say,
Me too.
He tells it like it is, Andy.
Yeah.
He's a truth teller. It's like, he's the biggest freaking liar who ever lived. No, we don't care about that. And confirmation bias is the most powerful drug in the world. And so he feeds that. And a lot of it is prejudice. Believe me, I understand those foghorns. They're not even dog whistles anymore. I get that. But he also improved enormously with Hispanic men. Not as much with black men as he wants you to think, but Hispanic men. Dear God, one of my college roommates was from Starr County, Texas. Median income, $17,000. It's right on the Rio Grande River. It's right on the border. It is the most impoverished county in America and the most Latino county. It's literally 97.7% Latino. As Jaime, my old roommate, says, we're more Mexican than parts of Mexico. It hadn't voted for a Republican since 1896. It went for Trump. The first time Trump ran, Donald Trump, he got 19% there. 19. Hillary crushed him by 50 points. This time, he got 58.
Why?
Because I think he said to them, they hate you. They look down on you. I asked my old buddy that. And he said, look, there's only a few ways out of poverty here. Work in fracking, work for the sheriff's department, work for the border patrol, join the military.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys piss on all of that. Now, I could dispute but that's what they're being told. That we look down on them. And again, it's a Clintonism. He's talking about his father had a general store, grandfather, general store in Hope, Arkansas. It was the only place where black people and white people were served equally. And he was 3 and 4 years old, standing behind that counter. He always says, I learned to look up to people everyone else looks down on. Because if you didn't have money to make groceries that week, Bill Clinton's grandpa Cassidy, would just mark it down a ledger. Well, they believe we look down on them. Now, the truth is, Mr. Trump does.
Right.
I think Howard Stern had to beat it. Howard probably knows Trump better than anybody. And he's telling his audience very similar to Trump's in many ways. He's like, he hates you.
Right.
He hates you.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, Andy. He does not project that at all.
No.
Democrats have to get back to celebrating work and values and all the things that we actually embody and that Mr. Trump doesn't.
It begs the question about candidates themselves. You know, whether we like Trump or not, or whether he makes our heads explode, which he does, in a way, he is their version of Bill Clinton. He is the natural, relatable, authentic man on the street, regardless of how he lives his adult life. And he's connected. You cannot deny him that. Is there a bankruptcy of candidates in the Democratic Party that can connect not just the Clinton level, but certainly the Obama level, and on a level that is relatable? You know, I don't know. Do we have people in the wings like that can do that?
A ton. I believe this is the best bench the Democrats have had in my career. Part of the tragedy of Biden not stepping aside after the midterms, I mean, keeping the job, he's doing a great job as president, but saying, I'm not going to run, which he had implied before. Mm-hmm. Part of the tragedy is that we didn't get to field all of our bench. Mm-hmm. We didn't get to put them on the field. And Kamala stepped in and did great. I really don't want to bang on her. She lost the 2024 election in 2019. Mm-hmm. When she ran the last time, and she took positions that most Americans think are batty. I'm sorry. The notion, and Trump had it on tape, and it was the most effective ad he ran. And I've talked to his aides. They never stopped running it because it kept working. They were going to run it like for a week or so. The ad where they have Kamala on tape saying convicts in prison should have taxpayer-funded elective surgery to change their gender. Mm-hmm. The answer to that is, I'm a prosecutor. I put a lot of bad guys in prison. And I'm proud that I did because they belong there. Rapists, murderers, child molesters. but we're America, and you're entitled to 3 hots and a cot, and in that prison, you'll be treated with dignity. But no, you're not going to get expensive elective gender surgery while you're a convict. No. And, that's what, I promise you, 90%, Charlemagne the God, who supported Kamala, said that was crazy, right? I mean, we all looked at that and said, whoa, wait a minute. So I do think she kind of, in 2019, took positions in that primary that were indefensible in 2024 in the general. If we'd have had a primary in 2024, and I hate to name names because I'm going to leave some out, but you start with, and I'm sort of thinking just geographically, I start with governors first off. Mm-hmm. Governors always make better candidates, always make better presidents. And I love, there's some Cory Booker, some other friends of mine in the Senate, Amy Klobuchar, but let's start with governor. Shapiro in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. First thing he did as governor was delist 60,000 state jobs that required a college degree. They no longer require one. 60,000 jobs thrown open to people who didn't have the money or the parents or the wherewithal to go to college. Brilliant. And Pennsylvania state government's working better than ever with qualified people who don't have a college degree. So I'd start with Josh. Westmore in Maryland. Everybody talking about Gretchen Whitmer, who's really impressive in Michigan. J.B. Pritzker in Illinois. Jared Polis in Colorado. Jay Inslee, who's leaving office as the governor of Washington. Newsom in California. And I'm sure Andy Beshear in Kentucky. Mm-hmm. Cooper. Who won 2 elections in a state where they hunt us down with dogs. Mm-hmm. So I've never seen so much talent. Mm-hmm. I mean it. And that doesn't count like a dear friend of mine, Mitch Landrieu, who ran the infrastructure project for Biden. My mama doesn't know who he is, but he should be spoken about in the same tones as all those governors and even Obama and Clinton. That's how gifted he is. Mm-hmm. He ran New Orleans and got over 60% of the black vote and over 60% of the white vote in a pretty racially divided city. I love Mitch. So there's a ton of talent in the Democratic Party.
As a brilliant strategist, I got to ask you this, because this was a big criticism of Kamala Harris, and was also a now infamous clip where she was asked, what would you do differently if you were president? And she took a lot of heat for that. And the talk was, of course, that was a very difficult question to answer. How do you answer that question? How do you say, vote for me to continue all the great stuff we've done? At the same time, you say, hey, everybody who wants change, vote for me. I'm your change agent. What would you have advised her to do in those moments? How do you answer that question effectively?
Well, it was the one major mistake she made. And you've got to know that one's coming. Mm-hmm. You've got to. Okay? And I think what you say is, first, personal loyalty. You say, Andy, if you're waiting for me to criticize Joe Biden, we're going to be here all night. He'd been a great president. He'd been a great friend. He'd been a great mentor. But these are different times. Mm. And frankly, the first thing I would do differently was secure the border. And start with border security and break with Biden on that after saying you won't break with him, right? Mm-hmm. Then do it. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a rhetorical trick, but you say, because he is a great guy and he's been very good to Kamala, very good to America. So you say he's a great guy. I'm not going to attack him. And you don't attack him, but then you say, we have to secure the border. And he did repeal not just Trump, but Obama-type strategies to secure the border. Mm-hmm. Before Trump ever came around, Janet Murguia from La Raza, who's a friend of mine, but she was calling Obama the deporter-in-chief. Now, unlike Trump, Obama was targeting criminals. Dangerous criminals, right? He wasn't trying to take your abuela right out of the cocina and ship her back to Guadalajara. He was targeting, thugs and criminals and violent offenders. And that was the right way to do it. So we needed border security, and Biden didn't provide it. And worse than that, Democrats writ large told people who cared about it that they were racist. Mm-hmm. And I talked to a dear friend of mine who lives on the border, a different guy from my college roommate. I go down there all the time. I'm from Texas. This guy said, every business person in Laredo thinks we need tougher border security. And that's one of the reasons Trump did better down there. So that's where I would have broken. Okay, I would have picked that issue, which Trump said this today, last night. This is Friday. So Thursday night, Trump said, I think the border was more important, immigration was more important to my successes in the election than inflation was. And he may be right. So you could have done that if you were Kamala. We need more order on the border. And And we don't need a stupid wall. We certainly don't need to be mass deportations of 82nd Airborne parachuting in or whatever, all that nonsense these lunatics are talking about. But there's a difference between open borders and this insanity that Trump is, mass deportations. And you could have had security. If it was me, my build the wall would have been double the border patrol. That we demonize them. These women and men are heroes. They got to fish the dead babies out of the river. Okay, they have to track down these coyotes who are evil. They have to stand up to these drug gangs. And why not do that? Why not say, and I know their union endorsed Trump. I don't care. These are really good people. This is the thing. We don't celebrate working class people anymore. I go down there all the time. I have never seen a white guy or a black guy in a Border Patrol uniform. Okay, it's 100% Mexican American, at least in my part of Texas. So why not do that? Why not make the case that we're better to be trusted on real border security without, busting into your workplace and, shipping a bunch of really honest people out of the country?
Well, the answer to the question that you gave, which I think was the key, the pivot you suggested, which was, but times are different. That would have allowed her in that precise moment to shed the past and now start talking about the future. It seems so simple, especially to your point. How long did you have to prepare for that question, right? So go figure. But the interesting thing that you just said, too, about Trump saying about immigration being the biggest driver of his victory, that speaks to my belief, and obviously the belief of a lot of people, that sexism and racism had a lot to do with this. Because unlike inflation, the border issue, to me, which was his motivation, which was to go to these people and say, hey, all those scary black and brown people you really don't like? Well, they're coming over the border and they're taking over your cities and it's an invasion and blah, blah, blah. So it was just a button pusher, another trope to just rile up his masses who are racist. When I think about this election, that you had a convicted felon, a pathological liar, an adjudicated rapist, dictator wannabe, I mean, the adjectives, we can go on and on and on and on. And then you had this really highly qualified black woman. It's hard for me to go like, oh yeah, but you know what? Sexism and racism really didn't have much to do with it. What is your take on that?
Well, there's no doubt. Okay, there's no doubt. There's also no doubt we're a better, more progressive country than 50 years ago or even 30 years ago. Okay, so I think both are true. I always guard against the fallacy of composition. All the bigots are Trump supporters. Right. But not all the Trump supporters are bigots. Okay, but you are exactly right in the way he addressed the immigration, the way Obama did. Obama being the child of an immigrant, but Trump is the child of an immigrant. The thing with the Haitians in Ohio is particularly evil.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike DeWine, the Republican governor of Ohio, has actually spent a lot of time with those Haitians in Springfield. He's a very devout Catholic. These Haitians are Catholic. He's been to Haiti a million times and supports a church there. He was instrumental in setting these refugees legally in America, setting them up in his state. And for Trump to go out and say they're eating their neighbors' cats and dogs. So I did a little research. It turns out there are 110,000 Haitians with citizenship in America. There's 140,000 from the former Soviet Union. Why do we know? By the way, there's 50,000 Irish. My mom's Irish. So why is he not talking about the Irish coming in? Why is he not talking about the Russians coming in? Gee, what's the difference between a Russian and a Haitian? Because there are more Russians. What could possibly, and I don't know if Russians, I've never been to Russia. I don't know if they eat cats and dogs, but I'm quite sure Haitians don't. They're good cooks. So what, I don't know, Andy, I'm at a loss here. Why pick on Haitians who, by the way, they're in my church. So they're really faithful people. They make great Americans. They tend to be very entrepreneurial. They're just, you're in New York. New York is full of Haitians. And every one of them is impressive and successful. So why is he banging on them? I don't know.
Yeah, well, we're joking, of course, but we do know. We have midterm elections coming up in 2 years, less than 2 years. We still have a democracy. We still have rule of law. We're still going to have elections until somebody shows me otherwise. Like, what needs to be done? If you were heading the DNC, what would you start doing tomorrow that's different than what they've been doing?
Well, it's geographic and demographic, right? I would most importantly got to reconnect with the middle class and go to them and say that. Say, we are moderating, we are, and part of that is going to rural America. It is. When Barack Obama had 60 senators when he started out, 60 Democrats in the Senate, and that's how he passed Dodd-Frank, the most important regulation of Wall Street since the Great Depression, and Obamacare, the greatest expansion of healthcare since the Great Society. He had 60 senators. That's how he did it. And I don't want to bore you. He had 2 from Arkansas, 2 from Montana, 2 from West Virginia, 1 from Alaska, 1 from Missouri, 1 from South Dakota, 1 from Florida, 1 from Indiana, 1 from Louisiana, 1 from Ohio, 2 from Louisiana, I'm sorry, 1 from North Carolina. On and on and on. All 18 are gone. Gone. By the way, we've lost Pennsylvania as well, Bobby Casey. And this is a tragedy. Mm-hmm. Democrats in present memory used to win in South Dakota and North Dakota and Montana. And now we write them off. So we have to reconnect. The operative word, though, because it's critically important, is not resistance, it's betrayal. My friend Jesse Ferguson, a brilliant guy, wrote a column about this, and I heartily endorse it. It's not resistance, which sounds like the old left, but it's betrayal. These are really good people in South Dakota and in Montana, and not the least of which is Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, where we lost the election. These are really good people. So instead of going to them and saying, you're awful and evil for supporting such a horrible man, say, well, I get it. You're upset. It's like that. It's like the Muhammad's Radio, the Warren Zevon song. They work all day and still can't pay the price of gasoline and meat. Guy wrote that 40 years ago. He's completely prescient about today. Mm-hmm. Their anger and resentment grows. We should say that. We get that. But he has betrayed you. Now, maybe he won't. Maybe he'll raise the minimum wage. Maybe he'll expand Obamacare. Maybe he'll support, but I don't know. When you put a couple of billionaires in charge of cutting government, did you know that over 80% of Biden's investments in semiconductors and chips and green energy, over 80% have been in Republican-controlled congressional districts. Mm-hmm. And so now this billionaire is going to go cut all these good Republican jobs in Republican areas. That's a betrayal. Mm-hmm. But I think that should be the operative word for Democrats, is betrayal. Mm-hmm. Maybe he won't. Maybe he'll be great. Maybe he'll be another LBJ, another Joe Biden, and really care about working class people, but I doubt it.
Mm-hmm. Give me your take on Trump's crazy cabinet nominations, or as I like to call it, the casting of the new Lord of the Flies movie. And who do you think is going to get through, of the ones we're all talking about, which are very controversial? Which of those do you think will get through? Gates is gone, obviously. Tell me about Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, Kash Patel. What are their chances?
I think there's going to be a lot of roadkill. And Mr. Gates is the first. Mr. Hegseth, believe me, he ain't buying any green bananas. He's gone. Mm-hmm. He's dead man walking. Because look, Trump's not out there. Donald Trump knows his way around a television camera.
Mm-hmm. We posted something last night. I don't know if you saw it.
He posted something.
Called him a winner. Pete Hegseth is a winner.
Okay. Good luck with that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think Hegseth is gone. Mm-hmm. Bobby Kennedy has a particular problem, which is that his nomination has to come through the HELP committee that his Uncle Teddy chaired, Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. And that is the last readout of moderate Republicans, that committee. So I don't think he can get through that committee. Now, they can force it to the floor. I mean, there are ways. So I think a lot of these people are problematic, but many will get through. And my worry is those who don't get through, he'll install. He'll go around the Constitution. And he can use legally, he can use the Vacancies Act, he can use recess appointments. This is what's particularly dangerous about Trump 2.0, is that he will have people around him who understand the levers of power far better than or are willing to help him manipulate those levers of power far better. So again, here's how Democrats ought to go at it. I think there is this recurring motif of, you think you find anybody anywhere who hasn't been accused of sexual harassment, but apparently not. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the wrong way to go. The right way to go is call it what it is. It's a billionaire boys club. He has nominated or named 11 billionaires so far, as of December 6th, 11, but that's 11 more than Joe Biden. And I'm not against billionaires. I honestly admire people who can, George Lucas is, this most creative genius who ever lived. He ought to be a billionaire. Great. But when you put our government in the hands of a billionaires boys club who seems hell-bent on taking away our Medicare, our Medicaid, our Obamacare, all of our rights, that's problematic. It's government of the billionaires, by the billionaires, and for the billionaires. And I know it sounds like Bernie Sanders, but I think Bernie's right when he talks about that.
He is right, but what worries me, Paul, is that we're living in this alternate universe that we've never experienced before. There were always guardrails and logic and rationale. Now you have people who will listen to whatever you just said and go, yes, but they're so smart and they're the ones that can save us. I mean, how do you explain the infatuation with Elon Musk? There are these vile people who the MAGA world loves because it's aspirational. They look at these people and they think, wow, they've done this so well for themselves, they're going to do it for us, despite the fact that none of it is true. It's all bullshit, smoke and mirrors. So that's what I worry about. Is we live in the age of gaslighting and cultish mentality, and have we gone too far to where none of this will ever matter anymore because people are not logical or rational anymore. They don't even vote for their own interests anymore.
There is some culture in history, right? George Washington was one of the wealthiest men in America when he took over. Andrew Mellon was the richest man on earth when he became Treasury Secretary 100 years ago. So that's always been there. JFK put Douglas Dillon in charge of the Treasury Department. C. Dillon Reed, one of the wealthiest men in America. So we've always had that. And I think it's good that we admire success and we admire wealth. I'm all for that. I honestly am. I think LeBron James is underpaid, okay? I think Shohei Ohtani is underpaid. So most Americans are that way, right? We reflexively want to admire that. What we don't want, though, is for those folks then to pull up the ladder behind them and to keep us from joining that club. And I think that's the indictment that we can make. But that's sort of the cultural history. But you're right about today. Different about today is we are in the era of social media. And, this is what I teach. Every form of mass communication creates its own politics. Okay, so Herr Gutenberg comes up with movable type around about 1450. And the Pope loves it. And the first thing he prints is a Bible. What came from that? The Reformation. And the end of the Catholic Church's hegemony over the mind of Western thought. This is a tragedy in the eyes of the Vatican. But it changed everything in ways that were completely unpredictable. The telegraph, completed in 1861 in America, coast to coast, creates a politics of national unity that was impossible before, because before the telegraph, information moved at 3 miles per hour. That's how fast a person on horseback could take the newly drafted Constitution from Philadelphia to Mount Vernon, right? And so that creates Lincoln, that plus this terrible war, but a message of national unity is only possible with the telegraph. The radio gave us Roosevelt, who, by the way, Lincoln would have failed at because he had a high, squeaky Appalachian voice. He would have sucked at radio, but Roosevelt mastered it. But Roosevelt would have sucked at television because he's ugly and he's in a wheelchair. Television, all of a sudden, we have presidents who don't look like Taft and FDR. We have presidents that look like JFK and Reagan. Right? One was a movie star, one was shagging movie stars. We wanted beautiful humans. Why all of a sudden we get Trump? He ran 2-3 times before in the television age, and he's a television star, but he never got out to shoot. Social media created Trump because he's the first social media president. That's different from internet. Social media has its own things that it rewards. And what it rewards, unlike television, which is just beautiful image, social media rewards conflict, confirmation bias, conspiracy. Anything that fires the amygdala is rewarded by the algorithm.
Right.
And so this algorithmic augmentation puts all of us who use social media, puts all of us into a well, a deep, dark well that is poisoned. I quit all social media, all of it. I'm not on shit. And I do this for a living. I follow this for a living. I haven't lost a step. I've been off everything. Oh, by the way, I also turned off every notification on my phone, except airlines and taxis. Okay, I need to know if my car's here or my plane's late. Even Texas Longhorn football, I turn the notifications off. And I'm much less anxious, and I'm much less manipulated by Musk or Zuckerberg or TikTok's algorithm. I feel so passionately about this because this is what has imprisoned us. You know, in the 60s, we were just as divided, but we were fighting about segregation and Vietnam.
Right.
Those are big effing deals. Like, are we really created equal? And should we send my father-in-law halfway around the world, you know, to fight a war? What are we fighting about now? Nothing. Nothing. But we're more divided than in the 60s because of this social media. I'm serious. Everybody ought to read Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation. It's about how social media is killing our children. But I think it's also killing our democracy. And that's why I think that's how you get Donald Trump. He would have failed even if he was a TV star, he would have failed if he hadn't had social media, which it just poisons us. And I don't know the answer to it. Somebody's going to have to figure that out. But it scares the hell out of me that AI is just going to take those algorithms.
I was just going to say, if you're scared about social media, artificial intelligence with the deep fakes and the stuff that I've seen that looks so real, and now you figure, okay, you're in Arkansas or you're in a swing state and you see a video that pops up of the Democratic candidate saying something outrageous, like, yeah, I did molest women in the past, but I don't do it anymore. Like, all of a sudden, boom, it spreads on social media. And I think that's our future, and that's scary because there are no controls for that. And that changes everything. Like, used to be you'd click on the TV at 6:30 and watch Walter Cronkite or Tom Brokaw or any of these guys, and that was it. A half-hour day, you got your news, and then you read a newspaper. Today, the ecosystem that exists on their side, that's what's terrifying to me. I don't know where we go with that, how we stop that, but I do believe that it's going to have major impact on elections going forward.
It's the most depressing thing. I'm sorry we'll have to find a hopeful thing to end on, Andy, but a dozen years ago, I was helping set up President Obama's Super PAC. And I met with an old college buddy of mine who's a professor, and he's an expert on social media. Then it was pretty much just Facebook. And I was like, I've never been on this shit, Steve. I don't know anything about it. What do I need to know? He said, you need to know one thing. Social media is incompatible with democracy. One will win and one will lose. One will survive and one will die. And I never forgot that. It's been 12 years. And all we have is more and more social media now. And I believe, and I'm a First Amendment absolutist because I make my living on the First Amendment. I should have an absolute right to pick up my phone and get on social media and say, Trump is a pig. Absolute right. So I never want to change that. But when I do, the algorithm puts jet fuel behind it, particularly if it feeds someone's confirmation bias about something hateful and divisive. Try posting something nice. I used to do this during Lent. I'm a Catholic, and we're supposed to give something up. So 2 years in a row, my wife said, every year I give up cussing, drinking, or Twitter, the 3 sins in my daily life. God never went a day without a drink, never went a day without cussing, never went a day without tweeting. And the tweets were always hateful and stupid, and, turns out I don't like Trump. Well, one year my wife said, why don't you do something positive with that 250,000 Twitter followers? I was like, okay. So I created a hashtag people are good. Every single day for 40 days and 40 nights, 2 years in a row, I posted something good about Americans. I limited it to America. Girl Scouts formed a troop in a homeless shelter in Des Moines, and they set the record for the most cookies sold. Right? Kids in Louisiana pitched in and bought their janitor a used car because his had been repossessed because of COVID. Right? People are good. People are good. I have 250,000 followers. If I ever tweet Trump is a pig, 5,000, maybe 50,000, like it, check it, whatever it is, share it. The highest engagement I ever got on People Are Good was 107 people. And that's not because we're not good. It's not because we don't want to hear about a heroic cop or janitor or Girl Scouts. It's because the algorithm doesn't promote that. It buries it. My closest friends never knew I was doing this. I mean, guys I talked to every day had no idea. And they're on Twitter as much as I was. That's one of the reasons I quit. Because it rewarded in me all the worst things, all my worst instincts, my most base, stupid, hateful self. And I'm still base and stupid and hateful, but I'm just not doing it in front of 250,000 people.
All right. Well, I don't know how positive we'll end, but we'll definitely end on some humor. I love it. Paul, always fun to chat. Please come back sooner than later.
Yeah, Andy, I love your podcast. I love that you're doing this. Thank you for having me.
All righty. Take care. This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Matty Rosenberg and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Langell. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.